Welcome to the 2020 Meat Show. We want to thank Cooper Rounds as our judge today. We're starting out with Showmanship Junior Division. All participants are wearing face masks, please. And Farm Bureau is offering water free
Well, an awesome way to kick off the day. And before we get started and discuss this first heat here at Showmanship, thanks to everyone in Hamilton County for having me out to work with your young people. And man, a really bright future on down the road for you guys in this particular county, because a very, very deep class of showmanship, and all the way down we talked individually about things to do and change for the future, because I'm here to tell you guys there's a set of showmen the whole way through this class that if they get a little extra drive and a little extra ambition, a little extra practice at home, all of a sudden this deal gets substantially more competitive than it is, because they've got the basics down very, very well. It's just the little things that are going to sort them. Young man that's going to win does the most consistent job of making the least mistakes. He's awesome in terms of feet and leg placement. Wants to get that one's head up in the air and make it really prop up from the side. He's the best when we study him in motion in terms of eye contact and intensity. That's what allows him to elevate in this particular class for me. But that's another young man that I think does an awfully nice job. Young lady that's going to be reserve in this particular division. Awesome in terms of setting those feet and legs by hand. The biggest issue we have with her at times, that goat doesn't want to cooperate quite nearly as well. And obviously, she's dealing with the biggest goat in class, and there's a lot of power there that she's got. And so, the young lady doesn't always control her quite as well as the young man. That's what's prepared for me, because I think they both do an awesome job. Eye contact is impeccable. At times, though, that doe, when we set him in motion, doesn't want to follow and trot and really roll like the young man's goat wanted to in terms of cooperating with the showman. We don't always get that one's head and neck quite perfectly up out of the air either, but I think a really, really nice pair at the top end of this junior showmanship drive. In third, I thought was in the heat and in the hunt of things for the longest time. We get him off to this last pass and wants to get hidden, covered up by the other two showmen. We sat there and wanted to pet, and that's one thing across the board I'd like to fix just a little bit. We get out in the show ring, we want to calm those animals down. I don't know that for me, I love them just getting scratched on terms of their top line. In terms of a way to calm them down, I think we can probably find a better route. Young man here does a great job. Eye contact needs to be a little more intense. The same can be said about this young lady. She's got a very, very nice goat. The chain wants to kind of drop down on that one, maybe not stay quite as much in control as I'd term ideal. We work with those two in terms of eye contact and intensity. They bump up in a hurry. Young man was kind of the same deal. Wanted to drop that chain and lose control. Wish we kept that tucked up on their throat just a little bit nicer in terms of having some extra control and extension. We visited with the last three about things to do and change to improve for the future, but I'll mimic my comments one more time. An outstanding set of very competitive showmen, very bright future here in Hamilton County. My compliments to them.
That are participating in the showmanship and becoming the whole year.
Well, the heat substantially cranked up, and as we get into our intermediate showmanship contest, and I'm super excited that we've got a good crowd to be able to watch these young people out here working with their projects and getting the job done well, because, man, super, super competitive set. I encourage all the young people out of the junior division that we just discussed, where we had a few things that we'd like to tweak and change. I'd encourage you to come watch and visit with these young people, because I think these top 5 and class in general does a tremendous job. Young lady that shows the champion or is going to be champion in this particular division does an impeccable job, in my opinion. I think tremendous in terms of her style and stance in motion. She's commanding in terms of her presence. She comes in, gets that one drove. She's firm, she's hard to the touch. That's her advantage over the young lady that's going to be reserved, is just her extra drive, her extra power and shape that the young lady gets out of that one. Her eye contact is impressive. She does a very, very good job. That's someone we need to watch and learn from. Young lady in reserve is good in motion as any, doesn't get the drive, doesn't get the power and the brace. The young lady that wins the division does. Young lady that's going to be third does as good a job as any of them in terms of getting one drove, running uphill, firm and hard to the touch. What beats her is when we set her in motion, Goat doesn't want to cooperate quite nearly as well as the two that we just discussed. And so on the standstill, an elite showman, we set him in motion, and that one needs to cooperate just a little bit better in a showmanship setting. But man, a really, really competitive top trio there. Young lady that's going to be fourth, again, tremendously, tremendously good. A lot of county fairs and a lot of shows in general across the country. Young lady, you'd be winning your showmanship division. What we need to work on is just head control and chain placement, getting that one's head and neck higher up out of the top side of her shoulder, allowing her to look just a little bit more exotic when we study her on the move. Young lady, eye contact and intensity is incredible. Just a tough division here. Young lady that's going to be fifth, again, kind of a little bit of a victim to circumstance in a showmanship setting. We get down to the top 5, and I'm watching, I'm studying who's going to make a mistake, who's not. Young lady got a little bit cramped and didn't give herself quite enough space. Didn't anticipate the young lady's goat jumping up and driving. She consequently got up in the back end of the one in front of her. Didn't give her enough space to overcome that obstacle. Wish we could just change that in a showmanship setting. Eye contact is tremendous. We're good on the move, and she can get this one drove. Just needed to have a little bit better luck on a given day to justify working any higher. But man, you do a really nice job. Young lady that's going to come out next, I think, is incredible in terms of eye contact, poise, and charisma. When we set her in motion, I think that's a goat that I wish we could just get alert just a little bit more, wake that one up, and give us just a more striking look in terms of chain placement and head carriage. young man coming out next, similar story. I wanted to modify him in terms of his stance. His eye contact and professionalism is incredible. Maybe looks a little bit more awkward when we set that one on the standstill. We round out with a trio of showmen that we visited individually about things to work on for the future, just general control and getting those things broke to hit the ring. But a tremendous, tremendous set and a lead individual to win. Congrats to them.
Congratulations to Lynn Williamson, who's our grand champion of the show. Reserve champions, Ashley Noble. We're now ready to start the senior showmanship class. All senior champions, please be ready to go. After senior showmanship, we will be doing another daughter class, so please be in the holding ring for the mother-daughter class, and after that, the county raised class.
I'll be honest, guys, around ringside, this is probably one of the more exciting showmanship contests throughout our 3 divisions that I've had the pleasure to sort. And man, the top end competition here is awfully, awfully good. You know, it's an interesting feeling being out here in a mask. I feel somewhere between bank robber and evil villain in a horror film. And so, you know, they say, you know, communication's about 75% nonverbal. And so facial expressions and cover up smiles and cover up those types of things. I've got a group of very angry looking young kids staring at me, and I've got myself covered up and they don't know what to think either. And so I hope you guys know that I'm not a mean, evil supervillain, and I'm really, really enjoying myself. The top pair here is incredible, and it's just the little things that sort them and minute differences in terms of positioning, where we sit, how we get them propped up, consistency of views. What sorts them for me, I put the pressure on both these young ladies when we got to our final pass in terms of, hey, I think both of you are very, very good. I think that this decision could go a couple of different ways. What we're going to do is put the pressure on both in motion. First person to make a mistake is who we're going to pull in second, and that's what we did. Young lady that's going to win does a tremendous job in terms of positioning, getting the most out of that one. I think this one looks better when she gets into him and gets him drove from the side than he does in motion, and that's a testament to her skill and her ability. A couple of things that are just minute differences that allow her to elevate for me. When we set him in motion, young lady, you do a better job of getting in terms of your body position and being back at that one's shoulder, allowing the attention to be drawn to him in terms of his neck being ahead of your body, whereas the young lady that's going to be reserved wants to get up in front of that one and just kind of drag him along around her. That's personal preference, but for me, I think in a showmanship setting, the way you do it in terms of being back kind of at the midsection of that one's back, and allowing his neck and extension up front to be the forefront of the imagery, I think that's what allows you to elevate. Additionally, when we get those things drove, both of you ladies do an awesome job in terms of getting them hard, getting them firm to the touch. Knee positioning, particularly in goats, is weird to me. There's not a sound structured knee goat in the world, and so we've got to do our best in terms of alignment, making sure that we draw a good line from the top of their shoulder to the middle of their knee to the bottom of their foot. Young lady up front does a better job in terms of imagery, doesn't let that one get camped out. If you'll notice, young lady that's going to be reserved at times wants to allow that one's front legs to get just a nickel bit farther back, wants to allow her to get a nickel bit stiltier from the side. But if you guys want to come in and say, man, she can drive the heck out of one, I wouldn't disagree with you, because man, she sure can. And both these young ladies do an awesome, awesome job. It's the little things that makes my job difficult. And like I said, I much more enjoy sorting the type shows than we do in showmanship. I don't like getting critical on young people because nobody's perfect. I don't have a problem doing it towards the livestock because that's what we're doing in terms of trying to make these things better, and requires a little bit more criticism to make that happen. I like to be positive when we evaluate this deal in terms of showmanship. Tremendous, tremendous set. It's the little things. I hope that makes sense in terms of our description and where I kind of place my priorities, but an awesome pair to be champion in reserve. Congrats to them. The young lady that's going to be third overall in our senior division, tremendous in terms of lines, levelness, getting them propped up from the side. Yes, put your hands together. Tremendous, tremendous pair. Young lady that's third in this division, from the outside looking in, does everything that the young ladies in 1 and 2 do in terms of getting our neck set high, making our lines level, feet placement's good. The issue is we don't get that one drove and firm and hard to the touch quite as nicely as the 2 young ladies ahead. If you notice, that one doesn't crease up and doesn't groove up like the other ones. It's because we're not driving that one as hard. We're not getting as much push. I wish we could change that about you, young lady. But otherwise, tremendously, tremendously good. Eye contact and intensity is tremendous. Young man, you're improving after we've had our discussion about what we talked about. It's consistency of views that gets you where we sit. Because there's times where you get this view of this one where you're driving him. He's firm, he's hard, he's grooved up, he's running uphill. You're in control, and he looks really, really good. During the competition, there was times where that goat didn't want to cooperate. He wanted to duck out and pull back, shoulder got big old gap behind his blade, just kind of like he's doing right now, where he just doesn't want to cooperate and work as a team quite as nicely. Young man, you do a great job, and I love your showmanship style and stance. You get your feet and legs where they need to be, and you drive them plenty hard, and that's good, and that's going to work well in a market show setting. In a showmanship deal for me, we've got to get our consistency of views just a nickel bit nicer. young ladies here in 5 and 6 are very similar in terms of style and stance. And I told them, we had the discussion, plenty, experienced in the breeding stock and the market side of things. And I'm not prejudiced towards either. I like them both. Love good livestock and love working with awesome young people like we've had the opportunity to in this Showmanship deal. In a breeding stock setting, for me, I think we need to work on our chain placement and our head carriage to make them more striking from the side. I think they maybe look just a notch more, just lazier, not the people, the goats, in terms of their look from the side. The goats just look a little bit lazier in terms of their look, not as heads up, not as striking. We can change that, young ladies, in terms of chain placement and how we hold their heads, and all of a sudden they'll get cobra-necked and really wild looking. That'll allow you to elevate yourself in a Showmanship setting. The young lady and the young man are very similar for why we pulled them. We got into a tough competition here, and these two young people are dressed for success. Eye contact is tremendous. We get out here in a Showmanship setting as we're kind of sorting, the cream of the crop from this deal, if you will. The goats didn't want to cooperate. They wanted to spin. They wanted to twerk. Didn't get those things just set quite as nicely, quite as consistently. That's why we got those pulled. Some eye contact improvements coming out next with these two young men. Wish we could just crank up our intensity for me. And then we round out the set with a pair of young people we visited about. Need to bring forth some more extras, some just extras in terms of feet placement, in terms of eye contact and intensity to elevate in a hurry. But man, an awesome, awesome set of showmen. My compliments to all of them. Pretty neat class here in our dam and daughter deal, and just a single entry, so this will go ahead and be our champion dam and daughter, but really a neat opportunity for these young ladies to come out and show their breeding program off, and I'm pretty impressed. The biggest thing in this type of a scenario is making the next generation better, and I think we certainly did that in this case. Really extended, attractive, kind of an older doe that maybe needs just a little more in terms of bulk and mass and width and bone and feature. We do those things here in the next generation with her daughter, an awfully nice one that's big-chested and barrel-caged and really impressive in terms of her look from the side. A really nice entry. Congrats to them.
Congratulations to Team Green. Bringing the mother daughter class. We are now in the county raised class. After this class, we will be taking a 5-minute break, and then we will start with the rubbers.
impressive set here in our county race show. Obviously an interesting dynamic where we've got market goats and breeding does mixed in here, and so you just don't compare apples to apples, if you will, and just come out which ones are the most unique. And I think we get into a top couple here that are really, really interesting. Obviously different in terms of their intended use and where they fit in the grand scheme of things, but man, I think an awfully good one that represents some quality to win. Round body, geek neck, flat backed one that's really impressive from a muscularity standpoint. I didn't expect this one on the standstill to get out and motor the way that he does, and that one's good in terms of his spine and his hind leg. I think a very athletically built one that's got some extras in terms of power and shape to go ahead and win this particular division. A breeding female to be reserved, and she's awesome in terms of her head shape, her horn set, her breed character. Love her bone, love her feature, love her body. We compare her to the one we just discussed. Maybe not quite as just out there in terms of topside shape and dimension. She's not supposed to be. She's for a different purpose. We set them out here and studied, which one's more unique for their respective use and intent. I think the young lady's weather that we used to win is just a little bit more special in terms of his build and his kind. Don't get me wrong, this one's very, very high quality. A nice kind of a female to be reserved. An interesting one that comes afterwards, and this double spot back one here that I wish was clipped a little bit tighter and a little bit more unique in terms of presentation, because this one's built awesome, guys. Tall shouldered and geek neck, sound on her feet and legs, and a great big back. Not as just maxed out from a presentation standpoint as the two we discussed, but a nice female. A great big body, big legged one that's burly in terms of her feature. This one to me needs to be truer in terms of her front step. Wish she was bigger in terms of her upper hip as well, but a very productive kind of a female there. We round out the top 5 with another weather. This one's big chested and armed, and I love his bone and I love his feature. He needs to just be more exotic in terms of his type and kind. Young ladies weather coming next. Great in terms of build and symmetry and pattern. Needs to be wider and bulkier and bigger in terms of cage and muscularity. Wish this one was more athletic. Love his bone, love his feature. We talked individually about things we can do and change to improve on the rest of these. I think a pair of them that are a little bit just plainer in terms of their look, but plenty functional in terms of their build. We round out with 4 of them that are just have brighter futures ahead of them. I think ones that are leaner and greener, more immature at this stage of the game in order to evaluate. But a really, really nice set the whole way down. Congrats to them.
Congratulations, Tessa Hardwick, for getting first place in the county race class. We'd like to thank all of those that do breed and race with those in Hamilton County. It's important that we continue. Right now, we will be taking a 5-minute break, and then we will start with our weather class. Those that need to be in the holding ring are Parker Williams, Ashley Wable, Blake Wable, Aubrey Johnson, Hayden Turner, Megan Haas, Berkeley Williams, Tessa Hardwick, Haley Newmall, Blake Wable, and Alyssa Burke. We're ready to start our first weather class. All participants for the lightweight class are now in Minnesota. In the holding ring will be Cassidy Shakel, Braxton Stahlbaum, Cooper Cooley, Allison Delph, Matthew Spencer, Samuel Spencer, Olivia Higgins, Kate Cooley, and Tatum Green. Please go to the holding ring.
I think an awesome set to start off our market weather show, and man, a really high quality pair to lead off with. And you know, it'll be interesting to watch these, you know, coming out of a lightweight deal, progress on down the line, because I think as we feed these out, there's a good chance that we switch how we like this pair. But today there's one that's just so much farther advanced in terms of his maturity and readiness at this stage of the game. Young man's goat is impressive in terms of his rib cage and his topside shape. He's fleshy, he's bloomy. Young man gets that one propped up from the side, and he's impressive in terms of his look and his silhouette. Like I said, he's just the more ready one that's just farther along in terms of his maturity at this stage of the game. You set him in motion and study him. I wish he was assembled just a little bit neater in terms of his shoulder and his neck, which he was a little more attractive in terms of his hip and his hind leg. All those things favor the young lady's goat here that's going to be reserved in our lightweight division. And young lady, you've got a very, very nice one that's going to progress on down the road and be awfully competitive. That one's short-eared and stout-skulled and crank-necked and impressive in terms of his lines and his symmetry. My issue with that one, you set him in motion and he's just not as opened up. He's not as impressive on the top side of his skeleton. That's how we sort him the way we do. But man, if I'm buying him, projecting him 90 to 120 days down the road, I think I'm going to hang my hat on the really good built one the young lady's got. Like I said, in a market setting, at a show, at a county fair today, we need to use the one that's more ready. But man, that one is impressive in terms of his build quality, his silhouette, and his look from the side. Love this one in terms of his lines and his stature. He's long-necked and extended, perfectly level down his back. That's part of the reason, young lady, that one doesn't have enough there in the seat of his pants is because he's so dead level. I wish he was bigger in terms of his upper hip and just more shapely in terms of his kind, but he's a show animal in terms of his look and his balance, and I like those things about him. Great big round body one comes next, and I love that. Actually wider and stouter than the one we just discussed. This one's not as just striking in terms of his look. I think one that comes with a nickel bit more high doesn't resemble quite as much of a show animal look as the one we discussed, and that's why he sorts the way he does. But this one is fundamentally sound, a good meat and potatoes kind, if you will, that's wide-based and heavy-muscled and good bodied. In a show ring setting, for me, needs to be a little more striking in terms of his look. Same can be said about the one that comes out next. Bigger in terms of bone and feature. He's extended up front. This one, when you get your hands on him, isn't as shapely, isn't as big and bold and robust as the one we just discussed, but he's neat in terms of his lines, plenty sound and functional in terms of his kind. Like I said, again, one like we just discussed, it's not quite as striking, doesn't have the same muscularity as the one in fourth. Young man's red goat that comes out next is one that I actually find a lot of favor in, long-necked and extended. This one's not ready to hit the ring today. Greener and more immature in terms of his kind. Young lady rounds out with a similar story, one that in my opinion is not built quite as striking as the young man's red goat, but a good big ribbed one that's sound on his feet and legs. That one's just green and skinny and immature. Feeding time will be his friend, but an awesome top pair, with ones with plenty of potential. Congrats to them.
First place for the lightweight goes to Blake Little. Second place goes to Ashley Little. We are now doing the medium weight class. If Blake and Ashley can keep their goats in the holding ring for the final class, for the final grand champion weight. In the holding ring for the next class, we need Ava Beckner, Izzy Klaus, Jenna Peterson, Stella Hartwick, Tessa Hartwick, Brendan Mosbaugh, Benjamin Spencer, Megan Haas, and Tatum Green.
Young lady brings us one to win this middleweight class that's ready to play ball. And man, one is everything we look for in a good show animal, regardless of species. That's one that's wide-based and square in terms of his build. He's assembled right in terms of his body cavity. And then in terms of having enough muscle and power and shape, stoutness of feature, he checks all those boxes. But what's really impressive is when you can do all those things, make them that stout, make them that wide, make them that powerful, and set them in motion and have the kind of just poetry in motion that this one possesses. Tall-shouldered, neat-necked, impressive in terms of his build quality. Guys, watch as this one exits the ring. Level in terms of his spine, attractive in terms of his hind leg, all the power and shape you can ask for to go with it. And I think just a really, really nice one the young lady presents to win the middleweight division. A round-bodied, wide-based, big-legged one comes next, and I like all those things about him. This one doesn't tie everything together quite nearly as smoothly as the one we just discussed. He comes with a little bit extra lower shoulder, a little bit extra in terms of his lower body, and you study him in terms of his belly line. Maybe not quite as smooth and quite as just athletic as the one we talked about, but you get your hands on him. He's big behind his blade. He's square in terms of his edge. That one's impressive from a muscularity standpoint. We like his extra bone and his feature in a show ring setting. Need to make him smoother in terms of his body cavity, in terms of his lower blade and shoulder, to make that one progress when we get into class as competitive as the one that just wins this deal. But an awfully high-quality muscular goat there to be second. Young lady's goat that wins our bred and owns at third in this middleweight class, and I like him a good deal. In comparison, he's not as big in terms of his bone and his feature. This one is genuine, though, in terms of his rib cage, his topside shape and dimension, his lower rump and stifle is the ones we've discussed, and he ties it all together awfully good in motion as well. Maybe not quite as nice in terms of presentation style as the two we discussed. And for all the power and shape that he has up high, I wish he was bigger and bolder and stouter in terms of his bone and his feature to compensate. But I think an awfully high quality one that stands in third. You study him just from the side, and the young lady's goat in fourth is one that's in contention to me. This is one that when you study him in motion, and obviously, young lady, I don't know, I think you were in the junior division, and so a little bit, maybe not quite as advanced as the showman on both sides of you, and I don't take that into account quite nearly as much when we get into a market setting, because we can set him in motion and study him on the go and understand that this is a good built piece of livestock that maybe doesn't want to gather himself quite as nicely for you. And so I think that's part of my job as a judge, to make sure we give a fair evaluation of the animal and of the young person when we study him. Young lady, when we ask this one to move, he's tall-shouldered, he's level-backed, he's smooth in terms of his lines. Like we said, I wish, young lady, you were a little bit older and a little bit just bigger in terms of being able to get that one to drive and push for you, because that's one, if we come in and drive him and make him prop up from the side like I'd call ideal, I think he can justify working his way up, maybe even into second. But one that we just need to kind of wake up and get him out of the ring. I think a good built one that's level back. Wish we could get that one shown just a little bit nicer. Young lady's goat that comes out afterwards, young lady, quite the opposite. I think you get as much out of this one as possible. You get him drove hard and running uphill, and that's impressive. We study this one in motion in comparison to the one that we talked about. He's not as neat-necked, he's not as neat-shouldered, he's not as flat-backed. I think he just looks a little bit plainer in terms of his build from the side, but a good, functional, complete one there to round out our top five. The ones in 6 and 7 are similar. I think one that's really big-chested and big-legged and big-armed. He's not hooked up perfect behind his shoulder. Wish he was more striking in terms of his build. Really long neck, long-sided one here that gets flatter in terms of his cage. Like this one in terms of bone and feature. We've got a set of these here that are incredible in terms of their rib cage and being round body. They're not as just striking in terms of their look. Told the young man here, this one's built too much like me. Tons of belly, not enough behind. And then the ones that round out the set, I think ones that are plenty functional in terms of their kind, need to resemble more like a show animal in terms of their look and their build and their balance. Really, really good one if we remember back that wins that division. Congratulations to them.
Congratulations. First place goes to Allison Delph, and second goes to Blake Wabel. Please keep these two goats in the holding ring.
Well, I think an interesting class as we get in here to round out our Market Goat show. And really impressive top end here, this top pair in our Market Weathers. And I think a pair of them that are very, very high quality. Maybe not the same depth that we had in our middleweights from top to bottom. We get into a few here that we're going to discuss still that maybe aren't quite as striking, maybe not as compositionally correct as a few that we had just a little bit ago. But these top two certainly fit the mold. They're high quality, and we'll discuss them. Young lady's goat that's going to win. Great big round-bodied one that is geek-necked and awesome in terms of his build quality. I think one that is tremendous in terms of his look and his proportionality. He's really round and robust in terms of his center. No wrinkles on the backside of his neck and super, super extended. You know, it'll be interesting when we get him back out here because I wish he was just a nickel bit shallower in terms of his center body. Wish he was just a nickel bit bigger in terms of his hip and rump. But I think one that is exotic in terms of his build, and for a heavyweight goat to be fresh and extended and attractive, watch that one in motion, guys. I think a very, very high quality one to win. Young lady's goat that comes out next, very fresh, and I'm impressed by how this one's been managed in terms of topside shape. You've done an awesome job, young lady, in terms of feeding this one. He's big and bold right behind his shoulder. He's flat and square in terms of his edges. In comparison to the one that we just discussed, he gets thicker there in terms of the center of his neck and on the backside of his neck, allowing him to maybe not be quite as exotic in terms of his extension when we set him in motion. He's not as big and bold in terms of bone and feature either, but one that's been managed incredibly well. And young lady, when you get this one shown from the side, his lines are good, they're appropriate in terms of proportion, like a very nice kind of a show animal. We ask him to walk, and he doesn't put it all together quite as nicely, a little bit looser shouldered, maybe not quite as attractive up front as the one that wins the clap. Very, very good one to be reserved in our heavyweight division. Love the proportionality and the completeness of the one that comes next. This one's dead level back, great big touching and round bodied. Where this one excels over the one that's going to come afterwards is he's bigger in terms of his upper hip, wider from behind, and then still stays shallower and more tucked up in terms of his chest. One, to me, in comparison to the ones that we talked about, gets a little frailer as it is opened up in terms of his chest, just not as neat and as exotic in terms of his build. Young lady's goat coming next. Love this one in terms of extension, levelness, beautiful hind leg. This one doesn't come with the same kind of body shape. Wants to get flatter in terms of his forehead. He's not as just expressive in terms of his rump and his stifle as the ones that we've talked about, but you love this one and study him from the side. Really extended in quality in terms of his look. Just wish he was rounder in terms of his rib cage, more powerful and dense from behind. Young lady's red goat that rounds out the top five. Big, big back and super expressive. Love that about him. You study him from the side, and he gets just a little bit plainer in terms of his shape, in terms of his side view shape and rump and stifle, but one that's impressive in terms of its top side handle and what that one possesses from a market standpoint in that regard. Great big-legged round body one coming next. This one's a little bit chunkier in terms of his composition. Wish we could lean him up and just make him more genuine in terms of his shape when we study him from behind. Big, big legs, and love his level build and extension. That one's not as striking in terms of just his exotic nature, build and balance. Spotted goat that comes afterwards, I love in terms of his top side handle. Need to open him up, need to give him more stifle and lower twist from behind. Young lady's got a really extended and attractive, good built black goat that rounds out the set. In comparison, we need to open him up, make him wider, bigger, and stouter in terms of his shape.
Congratulations. Izzy Klaus for champion heavyweight weather and Megan Haas for second place. We now need all first and second place weathers to enter the ring. The lightweight class, we have Blake Wable and Ashley Wable. The middle class, we have Allison Delph and Blake Wable. And the heavyweight class, we have Izzy Klaus and Megan Haas. Following this, we do have the Market Doe class. In the holding ring, we do need Grace Alley, Cole Wable, Azalea Davidson, another Azalea Davidson, and Lillian Williamson. Please be in the holding room for the first Market Doe class. Azalea Davidson, this is a correction. You do not have a goat in this class.
Well, an awesome set when we get them back out here. I think a tremendous lineup of 6 representatives from our each of our respective weight divisions out here. And, obviously not huge numbers, but I think the quality was certainly very, very high, and that allows us to get a set of class winners out here closest to me that all are very similar in terms of type and kind and what they represent. You start breaking them down, and I think young man's weather that wins this first division is one that we love in terms of his topside shape and mass and dimension. That one's impressive when you get your hands on him. That one we talked about in class is maybe a little bit forward in terms of his neck set, maybe a bit stiltier there in terms of his knee, but at this stage of the game, I like his extra maturity and where he sits in terms of just freshness. We talked in class, the young lady's goat that's second is one that I love in terms of his build quality and his skeleton. That's one that if we're going to bet on any of these out here in terms of progression on down the road and reading with some future on into the fall, I think that's one that has a ton of feedability and some future to him. I think one that's very impressive in terms of his skeleton. Young lady's goat that wins the middleweight division is one that I think is very, very good. That one is stout skulled. That one is huge chested and big armed and big legged. That one in motion is impressive in terms of how he manages his spine and his hind leg, and I love those things about him. If you're going to get critical on him, I think that's one that could be just a little bit square in terms of his front step, but I think that's something that's getting really critical on one that's very, very good. One that props up awfully good from the side when she gets in and drives him. Also, young ladies, if you want, you can get in and brace him and prop him up from the profile like we were. I just wanted to study him for a little bit in a natural state. Young man that was reserve in that division, tons of bulk, tons of mass, gets a little bit coarser in terms of his build out here, not hooked up quite as strong right behind his blade. We get to our heavyweight division, and that's one that I think the young lady does an awfully good job in terms of getting the most out of him. That's one that is impressive in terms of his length of neck and how slim he is on the backside of his neck. That's one that, in comparison to another one out here, maybe isn't quite as big in terms of his upper hip, not quite as big in terms of his stifle, but I think when you get him here from the side and study him from the profile, he's smoother in terms of his shoulder, he's smoother on the backside of his neck. I wish that we showed this one just a little bit emptier in terms of his center body, and then it doesn't become much of a comparison. I think a pair of them here out of both these divisions that are very, very close. Young ladies goat that's reserve in that heavyweight division. Great big round body, big back, good touching one, maybe not quite as striking from the side. And so I go through all that, guys, just to kind of give you where I read and where I sit on things. I think there's two of them out here that are in contention, and it's closer than probably I first thought when they first came in, because I think there's one that really jumps out and gravitates toward you, but the more you study him, I think that there's one that is maybe a little bit smoother in terms of his neck and smoother in terms of his shoulder, maybe not the extra bulk of another one out here, but I think one that's very, very smooth at a heavyweight. And so I think a pair of them that are awfully good. Guys, it's been a pleasure and a privilege. We've got plenty of show left to go, but I think it'd be fitting to take this time and say thank you to our show management and staff here in Hamilton County for making sure that we get to have a show. I love the fact that the stands are full and we've got a big crowd. Judged one earlier this week, and it was pretty somber. They wouldn't let him in there. There was one young man that had his chair staked out, said he slept there the night before to make sure he had a spot. Everyone's wearing masks, and it was just a somber feeling. As a livestock community, I know that we'll get through all this and come out shinier and better on the other side. But like I said, I just wanted you guys to make sure that we realize and say thank you to the show management and staff for making this a possibility and making it go. We get out here for selection of a champion, and guys, I think it's awfully close. The middleweight is tremendous in terms of presentation. Love his bulk, love his mass, love his topside shape. I wish he had the same shoulder design and neck design as the one out of our heavyweight division that is so impressive up through his front end. That one's big in terms of his belly, and I wish he was just bigger in terms of his upper hip and power from behind to make him balance. But young lady's goat that comes out of the middleweight needs to be smoother in terms of his shoulder, better on the backside of his neck. And so it gets awfully close. I think when you start studying them and breaking them down, which one reads with the most quality, the most unique in terms of their skeletal design. The young lady's heavyweight goat, that'll be our champion. Come back to the middleweight for reserve.
Congratulations to Izzy Klaus for Grand Champion Weather and Allison Duff for the Reserve Grand Champion. Next we have our first class of Market Does. We need Grace Alley, Cole Wable, and Lillian Williamson to enter the ring, please. Everyone that has a goat to go to the direct sale or that's in the auction, there is a holding pen in the swine barn. Please put your goats in that pen, please. Everyone that has a goat going to direct sale or in the auction, please put your goat in that holding pen in the swine barn. Also for everyone participating and all families, Farm Bureau is sponsoring free water to everyone that would need or would like water. It's available in the small animal barn. Thank you, Farm Bureau.
just 3 to start off our Market Doe show, and I think young man brings us a paint doe that's awfully good. Love that one in terms of her build quality and her proportionality. A great big round cage one that's neat and skinny necked, and her advantage out here is just her extra neatness of skeleton. I think a highly presented one that's good in terms of touch and tone. Love those things about her. This is one that reads with some future and continuation on down the road. Going to be interesting to see that one as she matures and blooms on out. Young lady's goat that comes out next in second, I see a lot of breeding value in. I think a tall-shouldered, neat-necked one that's impressive in terms of touch and tone up high. In comparison, she's not as big in terms of her chest, not as true in terms of her front step, and doesn't come with the extra just presentation value of the young man's paint doe in terms of bone and feature. Love that one, though, when you get your hands on her in terms of topside shape. Round out the set with young lady's dappled doe that's very feminine, very extended. Love her down her top and how level that one is in terms of her design. Comparatively, need to give her more bone, more feature, more width to play with a really competitive pair of them, but a really nice way to start off our Market Doe show. My compliments to them.
Congratulations to Cole Wagel for getting first place in this class of the Market Doe, and Lillian Williamson for second place. Please keep these 2 goats in the holding ring so you'll be available for the Grand Champion Market Doe class. Right now we have the second class of the Market Does. We should have Allison Delph, Tessa Hardwick, Lillian Williamson, Jenna Peterson, Tatum Green, and Allison Delph in the ring.
Well, I'm not good at hiding a poker face, and so I'll get out right away and say it. Young lady's doe kid that's going to win this class is my favorite animal that we've seen to this point today, and probably one of my favorite animals that I've seen this week. One that is impressive in terms of her build quality, and we saw her in Showmanship, and I was excited to see her again because this one is tall-shouldered, neat-necked, and smooth in terms of her blade, and then you get your hands on her and she's massive, insanely massive in terms of her top side of her skeleton, the kind of shape that she brings to the table. I think that's one that is assembled awfully unique there in terms of her spine and her skeleton when we study her in motion. Young lady's goat that's going to be reserve in this particular division has the same kind of power, the same kind of topside shape, but the difference is that one's not assembled as neat in terms of her chest, her shoulder, or knee in comparison, and consequently you study her in terms of proportional balance from the side. Her shoulder reads bigger than her back end. I wish we could just change her up in that regard and allow her to balance and run uphill the way a tremendously elite class winner does. But young lady, don't get discouraged, because I'm here to tell you the one that you're driving is awfully good. You get into class with one that is elitely good, and so you sit second. But man, that's one that wins a lot of county fairs. Dead leveled and big back. Love that one's feature. Needs to be smoother in terms of her build quality and her design from the side in this particular setting. But man, that one's awfully good. Young lady's goat that comes out in third. Love this one in terms of topside shape and dimension. This one's maybe as big a loin to one as we've seen today. My issue is the ones we've talked about in 1 and 2 have plenty of muscle, plenty of power. They put it together in a neater package from the side comparatively. I wish this one was stronger in terms of a rear pastern, because I do think proportional balance is awfully close between 2 and 3. But like I said, wish we could modify that one in terms of her hip and her hind leg and how that one meets the surface. But one that reads is one that has plenty of breeding potential, and down the road, wide based and back, tons of muscle in that one. Need to make her smoother in a show ring setting. Love this and similar story coming next, because this one, black-headed doe the young lady has, is one that's awfully impressive, round-bodied and big back. Comparatively, not the presentation value in terms of skin and hide and just look from the side, but man, that one has game-changing pieces in terms of chest and cage and arm and bone. Love those things about her. We set her in motion in a show ring setting. Spine gets tighter, not as big in terms of her hip from behind, but a really impressive one. Love the back and love the muscularity of the one that comes next. Like we talked about in terms of proportional balance, the biggest part of her is in the center of her body, then her shoulder, the least powerful from behind. I wish we could end that relationship, make her run uphill and look more proportional. You get your hands on her, she's great big back and great big cage. We love those things about her. Young lady's goat that rounds out the set. Dead level in terms of her spine and out of her hip. Feminine and extended up front. She's so level that she almost gets too level out of her hip. Doesn't read with enough expansion, enough width, enough power compared to the ones that we've just discussed. But a high quality class from top to bottom. Those 6 exhibitors should be awfully proud.
First place goes to Lillian Williamson, and second place to Allison Delft. We now need Cole Webble and Lillian Williamson for the first class of Market Does to come into the show ring, and then to return to the show ring, Lillian Williamson and Allison Delft for the second class. This is now the Grand Champion Market Doe class. In the holding ring right now, we need, in the holding pen, we need Cassandra Williams and Jaden Williams. We will be starting our full-blood does, 0 to 3 months old, after the Grand Champion Market Doe.
We get back out here as our Market Doe show comes to a close, and mimic some of my comments from just a little bit ago in terms of making sure, guys, we're showing appreciation to those in charge here in your county. There's been a few announced today that won't be happening in the state of Indiana, and you guys hope are appreciative of the advantages that you have and the opportunities that have been granted to you because of that. We're living in weird times, and I don't understand it just like you guys don't, but man, we're going to get through it together. And so the only way to keep things rolling in a positive nature is to be appreciative and feed off each other in a positive light and a positive sense. And so I encourage that from you guys. We get out here for selection of a champion, Market Doe, and I think it's very, very straightforward in terms of the one that needs to win. She's dynamic in terms of her look and her build and her balance. This is the one I was looking for in the weather show in terms of style and how that one's presented from the side and how this one couples an elite build with enough power and enough shape. And I'm here to tell you, if this one was a weather, she would have comfortably won the weather show. I think one that is jammed up and tucked up in her chest, no wrinkles on the back side of her neck, and then you get your hands on her. She's got all the power and shape that her skeleton will allow. When you set her in motion, it's impressive. And, I think it gets awfully close there for reserve between the one that was second in class to our champion and the one that wins the other class, because it's a very similar pair as what we had in our market weather show. I think the young man's Paint Doe out of the first class is one that breathes with tons of future and tons of potential. Really neat in terms of her neck and how extended she is. This one, I question whether she has enough expansion in terms of width, substance, and tone and feature. And maturity will only tell. If this one wants to open up and get bigger chested, get bigger in the center part of her body, and get bigger in terms of her hip, all of a sudden you've got an immaculately built creature that has enough power and has enough shape. Today, that one's really good in terms of her build. I don't know if she has enough in terms of width and cage and feature. Love the doe that's second in class to our champion in terms of chest. That one's big chested and flat and square in terms of her edge. That one reads more like a changer than she does a show goat out here. And she resembles more of probably our reserve weather. We talked about, in that weather show, one that a pair of them that had some unique pieces but didn't maybe have one that just tied it all together as neat as I had hoped. Our champion was jerk-necked and resembled the Paint Doe. Our reserve was one that was so bold and so bold-bodied in terms of his chest, and his cage, his rump, and his stifle. Love his change in features. We get out here in a doe show, and I think in terms of finding the one that's more unique, the one that has more special parts and pieces to her, it makes the most sense to me to keep the two together that are just the most ready at this stage of the game. An elite skeleton to win, a game changer in terms of chest, loin, and width to be reserved that's not as smooth. Congrats to both of them.
Congratulations to Lillian Williamson, credited Grand Champion Market Doe, and then the Reserve Grand Champion goes to Allison Doe. We're now beginning our 0 to 3 month full-blood does. We'd like to thank our 2020 Hamilton County Fair Queen, Rachel Reed, and our second runner-up, Annalise Jesse, for being here today handing out the ribbons and the plaques.
A great built red one to win our first class, and she's neat necked and functional in terms of her skeleton. She gives you a elite look of balance and quality from the side. I just like her extra look in terms of her profile and her balance to go ahead and win this particular class. A wide base, big bodied one that comes next, and we love her in terms of her skull shape and her breed character. In comparison, I think that's one that maybe gets a little bit more ordinary in terms of her hip and her hind leg. Just like to make her more attractive in that regard, but a really nice pair of them to start our full-blood show. Congrats to both those young ladies.
Jaden Williams received first place, and Cassandra Williams received second place in the 0 to 3 month old full-blood does. Please keep those goats in the holding area. We now have the 3 month to 6 month old full-blood does. We should have Tatum Green and Jaden Williams. And the holding pen for the 6 month to 9 month old full-blood does. In the holding pen, we should have Tatum Green and Alyssa Burke.
an interesting pair, and we'll keep it consistent throughout our full-blood show in terms of using ones that are wide-based and square and functional. And I know we've got some differences here in terms of clip job and presentation, and usually at the county fair level, try not to take that into too terrible a consideration and make it more about the kids and evaluate the stock just a little bit more intently. I love the neck set, the rib cage, the hip design, the hind leg of the one that's going to win. And guys, if you take clip jobs out of this and study just the kinds that we're using, this is exactly how we lined them up in the previous class in terms of using the one that's a little bit more trendy in terms of build and balance and extension. Love the extras in terms of length of body and levelness the young lady's goat that's going to be second brings to the table. Like I said, you start projecting these out in terms of mature weight. I think one that's maybe not quite as neat in terms of her balance and her symmetry from the side. Love her bone, love her feature, love her length and extension. Like I said, one that's maybe just a little bit larger in terms of her frame size, a little more out there in terms of just a mature weight and size for me. But we like her in terms of extension and levelness. A nice pair there for them.
First place for the 3 to 6 month full-blood does goes to Tatum Green. Second place to Jaden Williams. We now have a 6 to 9 month full-blood does. In the holding ring, then we should have Tessa Hartwick, Tatum Green, Megan Haas, and Brendan Mosbaugh for the 12 to 16 month full-blood does.
An impressive pair, and we're starting to get into a few that we've already seen today in our Bred and Owned show, and so pretty simple in terms of how we're placing them, and already handled several of them. Young lady's got a spot back one here that I like a good deal. Big-legged and good-bodied, and neat in terms of her symmetry and her look from the side. Obviously wish we had that one's neck wheeled down just a little bit tighter from a presentation standpoint, but she's still good stock, and I like her squareness, like her body shape in this particular setting. Young lady's Black Doe that's going to be second. Neat necked one that's good bodied and deep in terms of her center. I think one that doesn't read with the same kind of muscularity and stoutness of feature, stoutness of just shape and hip and stifle as the one we just discussed. But we like her a good deal in terms of her symmetry and her balance. Just like to make her bulkier.
First place for 6 to 9 month full-blood does went to Tatum Green, and second to Alyssa Burke. We're now going to do the Grand Champion Yearling class. Or I'm sorry, the Champion Yearling Junior class.
we bring back our 3 class winners from our junior division for selection of a champion junior doe. And man, I think there's a pair of them out here that are really high quality. There's one that's just a little bit more mature at this stage of the game, bigger legged and stouter featured, neater in terms of her design. And then our reserve is one that is neat necked and level backed and reads with tons of quality, maybe just not quite as ready at this stage of the game. Young ladies goat out of the last class will be our champion. Come back to the 0 to 3 or the youngest red doe here for reserve. Congrats. Really good one to win our first yearling class. It's wide-based and big-bodied and great touching. I think a really, really quality one to lead off with. Some guys maybe would call that one just a nickel bit more moderate. I think she's just functional in terms of kind, and I like that one's extra moderation to allow her to open up, have a little extra cage, a little extra bulk. She still manages it awfully well in terms of her spine, her hip, and her hind leg. Nice female to lead off with. Young man's paint doe that comes out next, level backed and neat up front. One that's maybe not quite as chiseled there in terms of her jaw and her skull. We set her in motion. I think she's a little more crisscross applesauce behind in terms of hind leg, but I think one that's awfully good nonetheless. Young lady's black doe, black-headed one, that rounds out. Very feminine, very extended. I wish we could just stouten this one up in terms of bone and bulk and feature, but one that's very feminine and attractive. A nice built, level-kinded one to round out that set. Nice group. Congrats to them.
For the 6 to 9 month full blood doe results, Alyssa Burke got first place, Tatum Green got second place. And then for the champion junior doe class, Alyssa Burke got champion, Jaden Williams got reserve champion. For the 12 to 16 month full blood doe class, Tatum Green got first place. Brendan Losebach got second.
Another nice pair. Lady's black spotted one that's going to win is so much neater in terms of her neck, her extension, her ladylike look from the side, and that's what elevates her in this particular class. apologize for the confusion. Had a little bit of a mix-up on her paperwork, but that's just kind of part of it, and everyone makes mistakes, and everything's good, and that's why we try and just restart and send them back in and make it fair for everybody. And in doing so, I think we find a really, really quality one to win. She's feminine, she's extended, she's attractive, and then she's still big boned and big bodied. Where I like her better than the one that's going to be second is just her extra look and proportionality. She's bigger hipped and bigger stifled in comparison, and consequently runs uphill and is just more attractive in terms of her balance. Big-legged, big, stout, broody one that comes out next in second, and she's massive-bodied and huge-legged. This one, to me, needs to be bigger in terms of her upper hip to make her balance from the side. She's not as striking in terms of her look up front in a show ring setting, but, man, I think a pretty nice one there to be second in that class. Young lady's black spotted one. We love in terms of extension and levelness. Gets into a tougher class this go round, and wish that one just came with a few more extras like the ones we just talked about, but she's level backed and feminine featured, and we like those things about her. Young lady's Red Doe that rounds out the set. Very sound, very feminine, very functional. She needs to be sounder and just stronger there in terms of her pasterns for me. I wish we could shore her up in that regard. And that's one that we could just make a nickel bit wider. But man, that one's feminine, she's attractive, and she's leveled down her top. A nice one there for the young lady. Congrats to you.
Congratulations to Jaden Williams for getting first place in the 16 to 21 Middleweight Division, and Tatum Green for getting second place. They will be at the ring here, and so will Tatum Green and Brendan Noseball for the champion yearling class.
A really good yearling doe show. There's a pair of these out here that just look more like show animals than the rest. I think one is really big chested and wide and stout and square, and I like her a good deal in terms of her ability to change and make things better in terms of some extra muscularity. We set her in motion, and she's plenty sound in terms of her build. Then we've got one that's maybe a little bit more attractive in terms of her type and her kind. She's tall-shouldered and runs uphill. Maybe not as opened up, not as wide, not as bulky, but she looks more like a show animal in her respective class, and that's where she lands, how she does. I think a really nice pair of them, and it comes down to our two class winners for me in terms of the ones that are in contention. I think you start breaking them down. There's one that just reads with more true breeding potential in terms of chest and width and cage. Young lady's younger paint doe here will be our champion. Come back to the really good looking one out of the last class for reserve. Congrats to everyone.
Congratulations to Tatum Green for the champion yearling, and reserve goes to Jaden Williams. We now have the 24-month to 36-month does in the show. We should have Tatum Green, Sandra Williams, and Jaden Williams. Really neat pair as we get into our older does here in our senior division, and one that's awesome in terms of bone and feature and how this one's assembled from the side.
neat-necked and awesome in terms of head and horns and skull. I think a really, really good one. Young lady's doe that's a little bit more milked down and looks like she's maybe in more of a production setting that's going to be second is one I like a good deal. She's awesome in terms of her build and her balance. One that's maybe just not quite as show ring ready as the one we're going to go ahead and use, but a really, really nice pair of them here. Both of those for the young ladies. Congrats.
First place goes to Jaden Williams for the 24-month and 36-month full-blood does. Second place to Cassandra Williams. We now have the 36-month and older full-blood doe class, Tatum Green.
Just a single entry to round out our doe show. One that is impressive in terms of her length and her extension. Really attractive and feminine up through the front third of her skeleton. One that, you know, obviously could be just a little bit bloomier and readier at this stage of the game, but she's milked down. We saw her in that dam and daughter deal. She's doing her job. I think a very productive kind of a female to round out our full-blood doe show. Congrats to that young lady.
Now have the senior champion full-blood doe class, Wendy Tatum Green, with the first place for the 36-month and older doe class. And we also need Jaden Williams and Cassandra Williams for the 24 to 36-month class to enter the ring. Again, this is for the senior champion doe for full-blood doe.
I think really a neat pair of classes here in our senior division, and get to see some differences in terms of stage and cycle and where we're at in the grand scheme of things on these in terms of condition and body score. You know, in a show ring setting, I think there's a pair of them that are maybe presented just a little bit nicer in terms of condition and where we're at for the show ring at this stage of the game. We'll keep those two does out of the 2-year-old class together. They'll be champion in reserve. Congrats.
Champion senior doe goes to Jaden Williams. And reserve goes to Cassandra Williams. We now have the grand champion full-blood doe class. The champion of the junior class is Alyssa Burke. Reserve was Jaden Williams. We need you out in the ring. The yearly champion, Tatum Green. The reserve is Jaden Williams. We need you out in the ring.
a pretty awesome drive when we got them back out here. Finding ones that bring kind of the same things that we talked about in terms of fundamentals from the weather show and the commercial doe show to the table in terms of just making good stock that are wide-based and good-bodied and muscular, and bring some extras to the table once we get those boxes covered in terms of some extra extension and look and presentation value. It's an interesting deal because I'm remembering back, I think we have several of these that were in our county born and raised show, and so my hat's off to you guys for making that happen and having that kind of quality breeding stock in county and in your guys' neck of the woods. I think is something to be proud of. We get them back out here, and I think there's one that, for those of you that are watching me judge some full-blood shows, typically don't get in and bite on ones of this kind of age and where they sit. I think they should be doing their job, but man, it's neat when they come out and they look the way that this one does. I think it gets closer for reserve in terms of whether you use the one that's a little bit neater looking, maybe not clipped quite as nice, or you use the wide, powerful, stout one that's maybe not quite as neat looking. And so I think an interesting situation there. When you put it all together, which ones are more unique in terms of type and kind and ability to change things. I think the young lady's doe out of the senior division is an elite kind of a show doe. She'll be our champion. We'll come back to our yearling paint doe here for reserve. I think a really nice set. Congrats to all.
Congratulations to Jaden Williams for receiving the Grand Champion full-blood doe. The reserve Grand Champion goes to Tatum Green. We're now starting the percentage doe classes. Everyone in the 3 to 6 month class should be in the show area. Samuel Spencer, Stella Hartwood, and Grace Allen. In the holding room, we should have Tatum Green, Madison Scheidler, Logan Bates, and Ashley Woodward. Remember that we do have water available in the small animal barn thanks to Farm Bureau.
I think a good-bodied, functional, sound one to live with. Love her in terms of her balance and her look, and in this setting, just substantially more just stout and mature and ready. Really extended, attractive, kind of wild-colored one next, which we could just bulk her up and make her stouter in terms of her feature, maybe level her out of her hip just a shot, but love her in terms of extension and attractiveness. Young lady's double red-legged one here that's going to round out the set. I think one that's feminine and attractive. Again, need to bulk that one up and just open her up in terms of width and mass, but really nice set. Congrats to them.
Samuel Spencer received first place, and Grace Allen received second place. That was the 3 to 6 month class. Now we have a 6 to 9 month class entering the ring. In the holding area, we have Azalea Davidson and Azalea Davidson and Megan Haas for the 12 to 16 month class.
maybe as competitive a pair as we've had in our breeding doe show today. And I like both these does a good deal. One's a little wider and a little stouter. Young lady's doe that's going to win is the most impressive in terms of her build and her silhouette from the side. Really neat necked and level backed and impressive. Young lady do a great job getting this one presented. Like I said, wish she was a little bigger chested, a little wider. That's how the young man's doe is constructed. It's going to be second. Great big body and stout skull. Maybe doesn't gather herself quite as neat right behind her blade and her shoulder, not as level out of her hip, but man, that's one that's good caged and wide skeleton. I think that one's awfully good as well. One that's going to come out next in third, dead level back. One to me that's just not as bloomy, not as mature, not as ready at this stage of the game. Young ladies that rounds out the set. I think one that we just like to make just a little more feminine and attractive in terms of her kind. I like that one though in terms of some bone and some ruggedness. Maybe it needs to be a little leveler down her spine. Nice set.
First place goes to Ashley Wable and second to Logan Bates for the 6 to 9 month percentage does. We will now be doing the champion junior percentage doe class. In the ring, we need Samuel Spencer and Grace Allen, Ashley Wable, and Logan Bates.
Really a nice junior percentage drive, and we get them out here. There's a pair of them that fit together awfully well. We talked them in class as maybe being as competitive a class that we've had in our breeding doe show to this point. One's a little neater build, one's a little stouter, maybe a little rougher top. We use the one that's a little nicer built, but we'll keep both these two high quality ones together out of that last class for champion and reserve in this particular division. My compliments to them.
Champion junior percentage doe goes to Ashley Wable, and reserve champion junior doe goes to Logan Bates. Congratulations. Next we have our 12 to 16 month percentage doe class. We need a Zoe Davidson and Megan Haas in the ring. Go ahead and win this class. Spotted doe that is great in terms of her build, her lines, her symmetry. She's level back and then touches with tons of shape. And I like not only her quality, but also her extra size and scale out here in comparison to the one that's going to be second. Young lady's doing second, feminine and extended level. In comparison, just need to bulk that one up, give her a notch more in terms of size and scale and shape. But a really nice pair there for both of them. Congrats again. For the 12 to 16 month percentage doe class, Megan House received first, and Ms. Sarah Davidson received second place. We're now doing the 16 to 20 month percentage doe class. After this class, we will be doing the champion yearling class.
Good Livestock wins this class. Wide, square, round-bodied, and big muscles. She's awfully high quality to go ahead and win. You know, there's some guys come in and say she's too small. In this particular setting, I like her extra quality, her extra ability to change the next generation. I think a good one to lead off with. Young man's doe that comes next, feminine, extended, a little more traditional in terms of type and kind. I think comparatively not as robust in terms of her forerib shape, not as attractive in terms of her hind leg, but we like her attractiveness up front and her extra extension in terms of femininity and neck. Young lady's goat that comes afterwards, round-bodied and big-backed, one that comparatively gets a little shorter out of her hip, maybe not just as robust and bold in terms of feature and expression, but I think a nice kind of a female there for her. Young lady's red doe that rounds out, feminine and extended, level-backed. This one to me needs to be bigger hipped and more powerful from behind to make her balance proportionally. But a really nice set from top to bottom. Congrats to them.
First place goes to Grace Reynolds, and second place to Matthew Spencer in the 16 to 20 month percentage doe class. We now have the champion senior doe percentage doe class.
get our two classes from our yearling division back out here, and I think there's a pair of quality class winners. Spotted Doe that wins the first class, really feminine, really extended and attractive. I like her balance and her symmetry from the side a good deal. The young ladies doe that wins the second class is really round-bodied and impressive in terms of her ability to inject some power and some shape. You know, comparatively, maybe not quite as extended up front, not hooked up quite as neat right behind her shoulder, but I like her quality, like what she represents in terms of a kind. And so we get them back out here, and which one makes a better show doe, which one still brings quality to the table. The young lady Spotted Doe will be our champion. Come back to the other class winner of the young ladies for reserve. Congrats.
Champion yearling sandwich doe goes to Megan Haas. Reserve champion goes to Grace Reynolds. We're now ready. Congratulations. Our next class will be the 24 to 36 month percentage does. So we need Azalea Davidson and Benjamin Spencer in the ring.
So we get all of our senior does back out here, and I think the two traditional ones will be the ones that win their respective classes. The young lady back here will have a second in class that's very feminine, very attractive. Need to just make that one bigger and bolder in terms of width and bone and cage. But man, that one's very feminine, very attractive, a nice kind of a female for you there, young lady. It comes down to the two class winners for champion and reserve, and I think they're similar in terms of kind. The young man here in the middle has one that I think is just a nickel bit wider, just a nickel bit bolder in terms of bone and feature and width. And I think in this setting, she's still tall-shouldered and attractive. Young man, you'll have our champion. Young man up front with the Cape Doe will be reserved.
First place for the 24 to 36 month percentage does goes to Benjamin Spencer. Second to Azalea Davidson. First place for the 36 month and older percentage doe goes to Logan Bates. And then for the champion senior percentage doe, Logan Bates got champion, and reserve goes to Benjamin Spencer. We're now doing the grand champion percentage doe class. We need Megan Haas in the show arena, please.
Well, we get all of our division winners back out here for a champion percentage doe. And again, one more time, again, thank you for having me out to evaluate your livestock, work with your young people. And I sure wish I could have given more high fives and handshakes today, but we're dealing with the circumstances we have to. And, something's better than nothing, and that's for sure. And I think it's been an enjoyable day. I've certainly enjoyed myself, and so thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. We get out here for selection of a champion and reserve percentage doe, and I think there's one that's assembled awful neat in terms of her kind, very, very highly presented. Then I think it gets closer for reserve because there's one that looks just like her, but maybe a little bit older, one that's level and tall-shouldered. There's another one that's a little bit stouter, but maybe not quite as smooth in terms of her top line, not as neat in terms of her symmetry. And so you start putting all those things together and finding some logic. I think there's a pair of level-backed, good-looking show does. Young Ladies Junior will be our champion. Young Ladies Yearling will be reserve. Again, thanks a bunch, guys. It's been a pleasure.